Bittersweet Dissonance by Watermelon's Melon Felon. Chapter 4. This is Yuuri Pladetsky, Victor said, pushing Yurachka through the front door. Yuuri, who was smiling kindly, gave a small wave from where he was seated on the sofa. Yura is going to one day be Russia's ace skater, so he needs a little guidance. And Victor wasn't lying. He had full confidence in the teen to be able to take over Victor's position. But that was still quite a ways off. Victor wouldn't hand over his records and title easily. That wouldn't be any fun. The blonde huffed and folded his arms. I'm the better jury between us, he insisted loudly. If you say so. Yuuri was more quiet and complacent, whereas Yura was loud and a bit obnoxious. Yuuri didn't do confrontation, and he also didn't seem in the least bit interested in arguing with a teenager over which of them was better. Victor didn't really care because he was the oldest, and he had already deemed Yuuri as being the better of the two, simply because he was more fun to be around. He wouldn't even get into all the other reasons he had for preferring Yuuri. Yura sneered. So what is for dinner anyway? Both Victor and Yuuri winced, which made the teen roll his eyes. Neither of you idiots can so much as boil pasta, can you? Offended, Victor was about to go on a long rant about his mastered ability to salt and boil water for his pasta, but he couldn't really get anything in because Yarachika's glare silenced him. Sometimes it was best to admit defeat. I will make some pierogi. You idiots will watch carefully. If you cannot make good pierogi, by the next time I come around, I will kick both of your butts with my knife shoes. Yuuri frowned in confusion. Don't you mean your skates? My knife shoes. Victor counted the evening as a success when Yura found out that Yuuri could play the electric guitar and that he liked heavy metal among other genres of music. And he did not miss the calculating look that flashed across the teen's face when he stared at Yuri's back while he was unaware. Yes, the night was most definitely a success, and Yuuri invited himself over for dinner next week, which was great! Yuuri! Said young man turned and couldn't help but smile at the sight of Victor. Though seeing Victor there of all places was a bit different, seeing as it wasn't a day for Yuuri to be outside his ice rink, it was still nice to see him all the same. There was something about Victor's presence that just made Yuuri want to smile all the time, which wasn't something he usually felt the need to do. And Victor was with Maka! The large poodle was bounding on over to Yuri's side, having no need for a leash because she was just that well behaved. Victor had done right by her, and she was absolutely adorable. He bent down in order to give the dear girl a good scratch behind the left ear. Her tail thumped wildly against the ground, and her tongue poked out just a little as she stared up at him with her cute beady eyes. Victor finally made it to Yuri's side, his smile still wide and happy. We have a free day today, so I decided to bring Maka to see you. Yuuri took a seat on the bench behind him in order to give Victor his full attention. His violin rested gently in his lap, bow still in hand. What can I do for you both? He asked after a moment of making sure that he gave Victor the proper amount of space. Not that the other man seemed to care about such things. Who needed a personal space when Victor Nikiforov was around? Maka likes Swan Lake. Can you play it for her? A poodle liked classical music. He was insanely curious to know why Victor thought such, but who was he to argue? Though, to be fair, it seemed that Victor was correct. Maka plopped down right beside Yuri's violin case, head swaying back and forth as the music rose and fell in pitch. He'd never seen a dog do such a thing, and it was adorable. And on the particularly drawn-out notes, Maka would lift her head and whine until the note was finished. Victor was smart enough to get a few videos that he proceeded to post all over his Instagram, gushing about how adorable his dear puppy was, and how he loved her so much. Seeing someone who loved their pet so much made Yuuri feel warm inside. Victor was such a good person. Isn't our Maka such a darling, Yuuri? Our Maka. Victor had referred to Maka as their dog. Honestly, the world did not deserve to have Victor Nikiforov. He was far too good for anyone, especially Katsuki Yuuri, of all people. He was incredibly fortunate to have Victor as a friend. She certainly is, he agreed, secretly liking how open Victor was to including him in things, as if it was something he secretly yearned for. I'm sorry that I have to go. I don't want to leave you, but it's a requirement. Yuuri placed a hand on Victor's shoulder and smiled up at him. Victor's breath was gone in seconds, completely taken by how amazing Yuuri's eyes were and how lovely he looked wearing a white turtleneck sweater. I understand. This is your dream and you are living it. I won't hold you back, Victor. I can handle a few days away from you, as I have done so before. And I know how to care for pets. My best friend has 3 hamsters, and I minded them whenever he had to go home for the holidays. We'll be fine. Victor sniffed, still not liking the idea of having to leave 2 of his favorite people alone in the house for almost a week. But then again, he'd always had to take Maka to a dog sitter whenever he went somewhere for competitions. This time, she would get to stay home with someone she actually liked. So it was a lot better than just being alone. And she loved Yuuri, as anyone smart would. So it just worked out better for her in the end. This time, both she and Yuuri would have someone with them, so they'd be together. But they would be together without Victor, which was what made him so sad. He didn't want to go! And if it was possible, he would have totally done everything within his power to make them come along. But Yuuri had to work still, and as he refused to just let Victor handle everything, that stubborn and beautiful part of his, Victor couldn't take him away from his job. He couldn't encroach upon the other's independence, despite how much he wanted to take care of Yuuri. It wouldn't be right for him to impose himself that much on the other's life. So this would have to do for now. Or at least until they could figure something else out. Everything will be fine, Victor, Yuuri soothed confidently. If you win gold, I'll make sure to make you some katsudan. It's not as good as my mother's is, but I'm sure you'll like it. After all, it's my favorite dish and one of the very few that I can actually make. Yuuri would make him his favorite food if Victor won the gold. Victor was going to take that gold as quickly as possible. A meal made by Yuri's delicate hands was like a gift from the gods. He wanted to try the very food that made his friend so happy. He clasped his hands around the smaller ones that belonged to the man he was smitten with and promised, I swear I will present you with that gold medal, and when I do, I want you to kiss it. The flaming red spreading across Yuri's cheeks was fetching, and Victor didn't feel like taking his words back, no matter how suggestive they were. He wanted Yuri's lips on his medal. And then Victor would be able to kiss it and imagine that they had shared a kiss. Indirect or not, it was still a kiss, and that was what was important. Yuri's mouth and Victor's mouth both having touched the same object. Okay, Yuuri breathed, chest heaving only slightly. I'll kiss your medal, so long as it's gold. Victor would fly if his heart wasn't tethered to Katsuki Yuri's existence. Someone is looking a little too happy to be normal, Christoph Giametti sang once he laid his green eyes on Victor's lovesick form. The Russian skater couldn't help but beam in his friend's direction. He was just so happy and he wanted to gush. And who better to gossip with than Chris? Chris! I have so much to tell you. I have been building up to this, and I swear if I don't say anything, I will burst. Come get some coffee with me and tell me at the shop. And you know we both have mobile phones and internet. It's not as if either of us cannot get into contact with each other. You could have very well sent me a text or an IM sometime. But this is something that needs to be done in person, protested Victor as he followed the Swiss man from the hotel lobby. France was currently very sunny, enough for him to wish that he'd brought a hat. I saved the photos and recordings, and I just have so much that I want you to see. You are going to lose your mind and will probably be jealous. A whistle in response. It must be good if you had reined in your impulses to tell me until now. It was, and he nodded gravely to show his honesty. Victor was going to brag about his Yuuri, and he wasn't going to let Chris get a single word in. He rehearsed what he planned to say, had the folder he wanted Chris to see already lined up in the order that he preferred. The recordings and videos were also ready to be played at any time. He had it all to go. They walked for a few minutes until Chris spotted a large white sign with a brown coffee cup painted over the front. After ordering and collecting their purchases, they sat themselves in a secluded booth at the back of the shop, and Victor took a deep breath. I made someone. he admitted quietly, pulling his mobile out. A lone, dark brow lifted slightly. This could be taken in many ways, but judging by your excitement, this would be a no lover. Victor wilted for a split second because, no, he and Yuuri were not lovers. Yes! But that did not mean that he didn't have hopes for their futures! So he would keep a chipper attitude until the very end. Not yet, anyhow, but soon I intend to marry this man! Another shocked whistle. Victor placed his mobile in Chris's hand. Just look at all the photos I managed to take of him! He's gorgeous and amazing and so very talented, and I adore everything about him! Chris's green eyes flickered back and forth. He tilted the mobile from side to side and even turned the phone upside down a few times. Finally, after what felt like a millennia of him appreciating Yuuri's subtle beauty, the man looked up from the screen and said, "He's got some wicked thighs on him. Strange for such a cute, baby-faced individual." "He is not baby-faced! He's just a little chubby!" And that chub was adorable and made Victor want to hug Yuuri all the time. The other man shrugged. "Chubby or not, those thighs are killer. What's his name and what does he do for a living? And why in all the world have you not given it to him yet?" "Katsuki Yuuri is a musician, and I don't think he understands that I'm interested him in more than a friendly way." Chris snorted. "Are you serious? Have you actually tried all the usual moves?" "Some, but he's a bit shy and I don't want to scare him off. We've only known each other for about 3 months." "As you want to marry him." Chris rolled his eyes towards the ceiling. "What do you even know about him, Victor?" His lower lip jutted out in an intense pout that usually got him whatever he wanted if he worked it hard enough. "Katsuki Yuuri is 23 years old. He's a graduate of Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. He's a musical prodigy in terms of stringed instruments and plays the most beautiful music I have ever heard. Born in Japan, speaks 3 languages fluently, loves white chocolate and rice, has never had sexual intercourse, which might play into why his ex dumped him, though I didn't want to intrude by asking. He snores when he sleeps and loves poodles." "You seem to know a lot. Why would you know if he snores?" asked Chris, eyebrow wiggling up and down repeatedly. "Yuuri was dumped cruelly after moving to Russia to pursue a relationship. He was stuck in a terrible flat with a horrible man as a landlord, barely getting by with the pay from working at a bar and whatever money he managed to get while playing his violin in different parks during the weekdays. He was evicted suddenly, and Yurachka found out that he was staying in a hostel and told me about it, and I guilt-tripped Yuuri into moving in with me." There was a moment of silence between them before Chris managed to just sum up everything almost perfectly. "You sure know how to pick them." And yes, he really did. "Just wait until you meet him. You'll adore him too." Woof! Maka trotted into the kitchen, television remote in her mouth. She proceeded to sit at his feet and stare up at him expectantly. Yuuri nodded along for the overgrown puppy's benefit. "I know, Victor is going to be on soon." Maka was a lot smarter than people gave her credit for. She seemed to understand the happenings going on around her more than even Yuuri did, knowing when he should turn the TV on and watch Victor perform even. Instead of going out, he'd stayed home with the poodle because he'd promised Victor that he would watch him perform. He'd even made a note of it on his mobile. And it seemed that Maka just instinctively knew when he should be in the lounge watching her human perform for him. Yuuri had never seen competitive figure skating. He'd never been interested enough in what his friend Yuko had liked. Sure, he'd done a few things on skates, and if needed, could make his way around a rink without smashing his face off of the ice. But dancing had taken precedence in his younger years, so he didn't try anything more than the basics. Victor was literally called the god of figure skating and the living legend. He was a prodigy who worked his butt off to keep the top spot he'd worked hard for the past 20 years. His Wikipedia page listed his birthday as Christmas Day. Said that he was born in St. Petersburg 27 years prior. He'd set many records over the course of his career. Those set in the junior division had yet to be broken by any of the junior skaters, and no one had come along to take the senior records from him either. For someone like Viktor Nikiforov, there was nowhere else to go from now. He was at the top, and one couldn't get any higher. "Marka, "Let's go," he said, grabbing his bowl of unhealthy food and leading the poodle into the lounge to arrange himself on the sofa. Maka followed along, situating herself over his lap and dropping the remote into his free palm. Once the correct channel was found, Yuuri sat back and reached for the bowl of pierogi that he and Victor had worked hard on before the man had left for France. And, because he never intended for Victor to find out, he gave Maka the last bite of each one. She was such a good dog. How was he expected to avoid those eyes the entire time? They managed to catch the competition before Victor was up to perform. It was easy to find him among the long line of skaters, however, because the cameras kept flickering to him, and sometimes they would pan out and play parts of what looked like a pre-competition interview. Victor promised to win gold again to keep his winning streak alive, and said that he'd been feeling more inspired than ever before. When asked why, he merely grinned and said that his life had been dissonant for a while, and he'd managed to find harmony in an unexpected place, and was grateful for it. Yuuri had been confused until Victor added that he was bringing said harmonious inspiration a gold medal. Then he realized what Victor was talking about and flushed to the tips of his ears about how blatant the man had been while on camera, live! There was just no shame anywhere in that perfect body. Perhaps that was a good thing. Maka, your owner is a dork. Woof! She agreed, obviously. It was hard to miss, even if one was sane of mind. Reporters were too blinded by the perfect hair and gorgeous smile to see it, though. He almost felt bad for them. Almost being the operative word. If they chose to be ignorant, that was their problem. Yuuri. You were beautiful! Victor, big smiley face. Yuuri, I am telling the truth, I swear. I have never seen anything like that. How could you have been experiencing troubles when you move like that? I didn't think I could be even more impressed than I already am. Victor, huge smiley face. I'm so happy that you liked it. I've dedicated so much and it means a lot. Yuuri, of course I liked it. Your dedication shows. Victor, I'm so happy! You're the only friend I have whose life isn't centered around figure skating, so I was a little worried that you wouldn't understand or like it. Yuuri, of course I would like it! It's you! I can't help but like everything you do. Victor, really? Everything? Yuuri, well, you're a little too into PDA for my tastes, but other than that, you're golden. Victor, this is the best day of my life. Yuuri, I would hope so. You broke your old world record by 3 points. Victor, not that. I'm happy that you liked it. It's what I've been hoping for the most. Yuuri, you like my music? How can I not like skating? It's like you were making music, but with your body only. You were enchanting and inspired so much. Victor, Yuuri, I literally had to find a notepad in order to write down my ideas. I then spent an hour working through the notes that flowed in and out of my head, and I perfected some dangling compositions. Thank you for inspiring me. I might have finished a big project because of you. Victor, I'm crying a little. You are an angel. I hope you'll let me hear the music when I come home. Yuuri, sure. We miss you. Victor, I miss you too. Give Maka some kisses from me. Yuuri, okay. Just did. Photo sent. She's happy. Victor, photos sent. How will I go on without you both? Yuuri, you simply have to win the gold and get on the next plane out. Victor, okay. And when I get back, you're kissing it, right? Yuuri, I promised I would, you big dork. Victor, big smiley face. Yuuri, go and get some rest. Victor, I have only tomorrow to rest. I want to talk to you. Yuuri, talk about what? Victor, anything. The bow slid across the strings in a movement well practiced from years and years of playing. Yuuri swayed back and forth as he played, the music heavenly and definitely more tame than Eros had been. But he finally understood why. This was the opposite of sexual desire. This was unconditional, and it was beautiful all the same. Agape. He could imagine a church organ doing the soft arrangement more justice than a simple piano and violin duet, or even a harpsichord could. The musical notes ghosting through large metal pipes into a room that had proper acoustics would create that sort of godly affection that the song would need. It made him think of angels and choirs. Luckily, Yuuri had gotten his hands on such an organ before and had managed to work out the details after a few attempts. From the 4 different manuals to the pedals, Yuuri had sat and dedicated 4 hours of his time to that instrument until he had finally gotten the hang of playing it. And it had been worth it. Honestly, the harpsichord was more difficult, for him at least. So for Unlove Agape, he would need to get his hands on a church organ at least. For Unlove Eros, he had the violin already. He could get a guitar and the castanets. He didn't know where he'd acquire an accordion, but he could certainly try his best to get one. It would give this song a Spanish flamenco sort of feel, and it was a good thing he was familiar with such, having grown up in Japan under the tutelage of a ballerina who loved all styles of dance. It would also further separate the two songs from each other and make it difficult, even for the more experienced musicians, to pinpoint their similarities, and the fact that both were just 2 different arrangements of the same basic sheet music. It was the first time in a long time that Yuuri was able to actually finish any of the music he had composed. He had a notebook filled with pages upon pages of trills, chords, and random melodies he decided to throw together because they sounded nice. None of them had ever actually gotten any further than the page they had been written on. But with his time around Victor slowly increasing, he found himself more inspired than ever. And whatever it was that Victor had, he needed to find it as well, so he could keep his creative streak. So he could prove that his life hadn't been a waste. Unlike Victor, Yuuri didn't have medal after medal to show for what he had done with himself. He dedicated his life to his career choice, and it hadn't brought him any success as of yet. And while he'd been referred to as a late bloomer in terms of musical talent, he often worried that maybe he wasn't meant to bloom at all. But this proved that he had something, and if he stayed with Victor, then maybe he could keep it. Yuuri would need to make some calls and prepare himself if he wanted to surprise Victor with his work. "Maka, we're going for a walk." The poodle rushed to her feet and barked in excitement. The music shop he got the replacement strings for his violin had a few instruments he might be able to either rent or borrow. It just depended on the generosity of the owner. Or perhaps they would know of a studio within the vicinity that came equipped with some of the instruments he was in need of. Peachy was completely beside himself when Yuuri finally contacted him again later that evening. He had been demanding to know everything and anything there was to know about Yuri's new housemate. He had been relentless in his stalking of Victor's social media, and it took forever for him to label the man as someone worthy of spending time with his best friend. Strangely touched, a bit worried for Peachy, Yuuri had allowed the other to have his fun. After all, it was in hopes of protecting Yuuri, and that was what mattered most. And now he could finally tell the other that he'd finally finished the songs he'd been working on. After griping about them for months and months with nothing to show for his efforts, he could finally tell him all about it. It was a weight lifting off of his shoulders. "I will be going to do the music tomorrow. I promise that I will Skype you so you can listen to the finished products. I really think I have it this time." He felt so excited. "I was so proud of you! Despite the crap that happened in the beginning, I think Russia has been a good place for you, and your Victor seems decent. But I still want to meet him. The next time we Skype," Yuuri promised. "Victor has been wanting to meet you as well. He says that you seem like a good friend." "Hell yeah, I am!" After a moment of teasing, Peachy asked, "So who is the blonde kid that shows up in a lot of your Victor's posts? Wikipedia says that he's a skater and stuff, but nothing more about personal anything. His Instagram is lacking in terms of information. He's just got a cat he boasts about, and every now and then some rolls he likes to eat." Yuuri snorted, knowing that Peachy knew nothing of Parachke. "That is Yuuri. Victor calls him Yura or Yurachka. He's a little rough around the edges, but I like him. And he has good fashion sense and a nice taste in music. He just turned 15, and he'll be competing with Victor next season in the senior division. Something about not wanting to wait any longer." "Ah, the impatience of youth," said Peachy sagely. "What? Are we no longer youthful?" asked Yuuri teasingly. Nah, we're veterans now. We already earned our recklessness badges ages ago. We know better. Both jackled, though Yuuri was still a bit embarrassed to be reminded of those days when Peachy had come to share a dorm with him. More partying than he ever thought he would do. Message me when you're ready to Skype, okay? See you soon, he promised, because indeed it would be soon. Yuuri, taking 3 days off from working at the bar, had come with complications, but he was certain that it would be worth it in the end. After all, not having to pay such a ridiculous amount in rent, upon Victor's suggestion, had been a blessing in disguise. Also, the money Victor kept insisting on paying him whenever he happened upon Yuuri while Yuuri was out playing had begun to pile up little by little. He was able to afford a pair of castanets, which had been necessary for the recordings. The studio he'd managed to rent out for the time he needed provided a considerable amount of instruments, including an accordion of all things, which was the instrument he'd worried about procuring the most, as none of the music ships in the area carried one. Everything else was easily accessible. The church organ sound he had been imagining would be coming from a state-of-the-art keyboard that he had been skeptical over, but it ended up being really good in terms of sound and clarity. A lot closer than some of the electronic keyboards he'd used before. The engineer that had been provided to help him, Albina, was very quiet. She simply asked about what she needed to know, and then let him do his thing. She also didn't care that he'd brought Mako with him, at least once the poodle proved to be very well behaved and simply slept by the door during the individual times Yuuri was able to come in. Then she didn't care. Fiddling with the music was the most fun, but also the most annoying part. Flushing out the arrangements had to begin with recording the individual melodies first. Then he had to work on incorporating other instruments and elements in order to bring more detail, also while making small changes to the sheet music as he went. Basically, Yuuri spent a lot of time messing around with different sounds and messing around with the accordion, having never touched one before, until he could play enough songs by ear to possibly be considered okay with it. He would most likely never take lessons on it, though. This was just for the one song. He didn't know why anything else he'd ever compose would require an accordion, and he wasn't about to think on it even further. The flamenco sounds were enough as they were. The first day had been spent recording the melodies. Yuuri managed to get he and Mako home in time for supper, as well as Victor's call, which had been promised to be at 7. On the second day, Yuuri spent a lot longer in the studio with Albina, trying to determine which accompaniments should go in which place. Doing the work practically by himself as a musician was a lot harder than he had expected it to be. Almost anything he'd done in university had been done in a group, and he most certainly hadn't have full creative control since he was taking orders from someone else most of the time. So he only had to rely on others to do their parts. This time he only had a sound engineer on hand to help him out, and he was left to play all the other instruments as well as work out how to sync the individual parts together. Sometimes he wondered if music was worth it. Then he thought about all he'd put into music, almost 20 years of dedication, and realized that he couldn't give up just because it got difficult in some areas, or just because things did not pan out as he thought they should have at first. Chords and harmony, the feeling of the music. If he considered the melody the donut, the framework, then the harmony was the filling. An odd analogy, but he connected better to food than anything else, really. Both he and Maka had to be home early because it was the day of Victor's free program, and Yuuri had promised to watch it. Somehow, the puppet human managed to make it back to Victor's flat 4 minutes before the Russian had to skate his final required performance. They'd missed all the other skaters, but it caught Victor just in time. Though after watching, Yuuri was even more psyched to finish the music before Victor returned because he wanted Victor to hear the songs when they were finished. That meant he had a lot of work to do on the final day if he wanted to get everything done in time. Double the work and double the effort. Albina was a genius with the console, and Yuuri couldn't have asked for a better partner. She saved him from having to do it all on his own, and the studio he'd spent so much money on would probably get further business from him if everything went well. He could only hope.